Hi, everyone. I'm James Garbutt.
And I'm Denny Dumas.
And this is the Garbutt Dumas Real Estate Podcast.
Jamie, it's kind of cool to look back over our careers and just kind of see how the communities that we work in evolve over time. And today we're going to compare New West real estate versus Port Moody real estate. We're going to throw in some suburbs around those two as well, just to kind of build some context. But we're noticing a shift, and we've talked about this a few times in terms of the communities east of Vancouver are much busier than some of the communities connected to Vancouver. And just kind of want to share what we've seen over the last, well, my career, seven or 8 years, and Jamie's career, are you 12 now?
13 now.
13 now.
Yeah. It's kind of, and it's interesting when you go back historically and you can see within Greater Vancouver, certain suburb cities having their moment where they're outshining others and then some trail back. So what we're really talking about here is just the trends and prices within the same metropolitan area that we work in. And just how, New West versus Port Moody, an inner city suburb versus a beautiful mountainous water outer city suburb, how they've kind of performed over the last 10 years plus.
One of the communities we were talking about before we started here was lots of areas in Burnaby had their big moment in 2016, 17 and have kind of dialed back the last couple of years. And they haven't seen the big run and the peak pricing that we've seen in other areas in Greater Vancouver this year, like Port Moody.
Yeah. I mean, in short, there's, in a lot of markets, say like Lynn Valley in North Vancouver, Tsawwassen, Port Moody, Langley, anywhere Port Moody East, Poco, Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge, they're at all-time peak pricing. The prices that they're selling for right now have never been matched before, not in 2017, not 2016, not before. Whereas Burnaby, for example, peaked in 2016. Some of the craziest sales in Burnaby were in 2016, and they have not been replicated today. Different buyer, different market. That was back then, whether it was a foreign buyer or not, that was the foreign buyer wave anyway, or the fear of the foreign buyer, because Richmond, Burnaby, parts of Vancouver were absolutely insane back then. And then now, Burnaby's cooled off a little bit relatively to where it was before, and things have adjusted. I always used to look at the premium, our office is in Glenbrook North, New Westminster. And Glenbrook North, New West to me is the same New West equivalent as Upper Deer Lake, Burnaby. And when I would do kind of an apples to apples comparison of what a 1950s, 1960s bungalow in Glenbrook North would be versus 5-10 minutes down Canada Way in Upper Deer Lake, there were moments in 2016 where that gap was huge. Upper Deer Lake had some ridiculous sales in the peak of the market where these 6,000 square foot mid-century bungalows, I remember one distinct one, I mean, this is an anomaly, but getting 198 in Upper Deer Lake on Burns. But I think it was fairly common. There was a number of them that got 1.8. And when those were getting 1.8, the same sort of house in New West was getting about 1.2. Maybe 1.3 if it was lucky. So the gap between that 7-minute commute down Canada Way cost you $500,000 back then. $500,000 to $600,000. Whereas now, when they've put the foreign tax up, the market is local buyers primarily, and it's been adjusted. I think that gap that was once, call it $500,000-$600,000 for a 7-minute drive down Canada Way, that's probably now a $300,000 gap. And that's probably where it should be. Maybe even two, maybe 2 to 300, 2 on the low end, 350 on the high end.
Yeah, totally. Port Moody, New West.
But yeah, we're talking about Port Moody, not Burnaby. But you're right. But I think Burnaby was a prime example of a way like Port Moody is getting this wave of people that want outdoor amenities. And the previous version of a real extreme wave was just how hot Burnaby and Richmond in certain parts got, not for outdoor amenities, but that was the last 2016 wave.
Totally.
Yeah.
Let's kind of context this with Denny is the gut feel, intuition, emotional kind of guy who's really just going based off of activity and remembering what it was like in 2014, 2015 when I started in real estate. And Jamie has a whole book of stats. And so it's going to be quite kind of interesting to see if my gut feels are correct, because I don't necessarily know if they are. But I'm going to share my gut feel, and then you share some maybe more.
Yeah, let's go into it.
Historical numbers. When I got into the industry in 2014, I remember Port Moody being slightly less in terms of price points for very similar product. Let's say your average 2-bedroom condo in 2010 built low-rise building. Klahani is an example in Port Moody. Victoria Hill is an example in New Est. I remember them being either at par or New Est slightly ahead. And it seemed like buyers that we were working with were often considering both communities. New Est and Port Moody have a lot of similar demographics, let's say. People like New Est because it's close to the city. You're a little bit more commuter friendly with SkyTrain. Port Moody, people like for the outdoors, the amenities that continue to get better and better. And it seemed like that young couple that we often work with was often considering both, and the price points were pretty similar. And flash forward 7 years, we're in 2021. Port Moody is one of the busier communities, if not the busiest community that we work in. And we've seen that price gap much heavily more favored in Port Moody's direction. That average 2-bedroom condo, let's say Victoria versus Klahani, is now probably $100,000 apart in favor of Port Moody. We've seen some sales, let's say 1,000 square foot condo, we've seen a few sales in the mid to high sevens in the last few months, versus that Victoria Hill condo is still in that high fives kind of range. So that's almost, that's 150 to 200K.
Well, a $750,000 Port Moody 2-bedroom would be a wood frame, 1,000 square foot?
Roughly, yeah.
Roughly. We have an example of one that sold on the top floor that was around that size that cracked 800,000.
That's
correct?
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so that's on the higher end. So we'll go kind of mid-row, 750, call it third floor, 1,000 square foot, 2-bedroom. Mm-hmm. And that same product in Victoria Hill, New Est would be what?
Under 6.
1,000 square feet under, probably low sixes right now.
Yeah, maybe around 6.
Yeah, under 6 is probably under that 900 square foot mark, so a little bit smaller place. But essentially, you're right. They've separated the two.
Yeah.
Like and I do recall, this is going back, in the memory a bit, but I do often recall when I was thinking of the buyers you're referring to that were open-minded to say, New West, Coquitlam, Port Moody, just because they are similar price points. And Coquitlam West was a little more expensive than, say, Central Coquitlam, but I often remember referencing Port Moody and New West around the same price point. Mm-hmm. There may have been moments where it edged it out, but Coquitlam was a little bit cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now that was because a premium of being closer to downtown Vancouver.
Yeah.
There was a premium, and that premium of proximity to work downtown, that's what's kind of fading compared to the premium of being close to outdoor amenities and I guess Brewers Row and all the good that, say, Port Moody has to offer.
We have a pretty recent 1-bedroom comparable too, that we sold a third floor Klahani unit towards the end of February for $525. It was 700 square feet. And your typical 1-bedroom condo in the Grove in Victoria Hill, 2008 to 2012 built buildings on a third floor right now, 650 square feet, around $450K. So that's a $75,000 gap there.
And I mean, aside from Victoria Hill, I think in Victoria Hill, there's 2 bedrooms that are in the 5s. So really you can get a very entry-level 2-bedroom for within $50,000 of a 1-bedroom in Port Moody.
Exactly.
Yeah, and even we're using Victoria Hill as an example, but in New West, there's the Plaza 88, the 3 big towers above the SkyTrain station.
Yeah.
And those are smaller units, larger towers, inner city suburb, arguably the products that are depressed in this market. They're not thriving in a pandemic. Mm-hmm. And you can get concrete. I can't remember the year they were built, but it's
2008, 2009.
Yeah, 2008, 2009. And those are starting in the, I want to say higher 5s, but it could be mid 5s. Actually, it could be even lower 5s.
They're mid 5s. Yeah, there's a couple that came up in the last couple months on the lower floors, like floor 10, 11, 12, and they were 550-ish.
Yeah. We're also not in the rental market, but from my understanding too, the rents in Port Moody are quite a bit higher than what we're seeing over here.
Totally.
So that could be part of it. But yeah, a one bedroom, $75,000 gap, say apples to apples, wood frame to wood frame, Port Moody to New West. A two bedroom, 100,000, maybe 125.
Yeah.
Now houses, they're a little bit different because New West offers very different style homes than Port Moody. But I mean, I was kind of looking at the stats this morning just so I have some reference point, don't know what I'm talking about. And I guess it depends where in Port Moody and what. Like there's College Park, Glen Eyre areas that are not as, out there as say Ioko. And in College Park, Glen Eyre, they have a lot of 1950s, 60s bungalow style homes that are similar to what run in New West.
Yeah.
And when I compare those neighborhoods apples to apples with a house in say College Park versus a house in the Heights or West End or Glenbrook North, the New West equivalent, I think there's about $100,000 difference in more expensive in Port Moody. So what would be 1.4 in New West would be 1.5 in those neighborhoods. Where Port Moody has seen the big jumps is a lot of Heritage Mountain has larger homes. And these larger homes are starting to really, like the median price in Port Moody in March was 1,739. That was the median detached home sale price for Port Moody, which is the highest it's ever been. But the Heritage Mountain, these 3,500 square foot 90s built homes, they're around 1.8 now. And there's probably examples upwards of 2 million. There's examples that are lower, but call it around 1.8. And that is the typical home that Port Moody has to offer. Those don't really readily exist in New West, but I did have a client offer on, that was a 3,500 square foot 90s built home. I had a client offer on a 4,100 square foot 90s built home in Burnaby, and it was in the mid 1.7s. So that's the Burnaby crest. So which is, similar to New West, I guess, in price point. But in that particular example that happened last week, you have a Port Moody home that's smaller, that's worth more than a Burnaby home that's larger. And I think that for the first time in history, that's probably happened.
Totally. Hey?
Yeah. But no, the Port Moody also, the stats are a little bit all over the place because Port Moody has Anmore, and Belcarra that has very expensive homes, Alderside, and so quite simply, New West does not have an Alderside caliber house. We're not going to get those Anmore, price points. Yeah.
New West is kind of, it seems like Port Moody across the board is one of the most active communities in Greater Vancouver versus New West seems to have like really hit and miss areas. Like you mentioned the downtown New West condos being a bit slower than other product or similar product in other cities. Queen's Park has been really active for those like heritage large homes in the first few months of 2021. I've seen more sales over 2 million in Queen's Park than I've ever seen before in a year. And we're 5 months in, 4.5 months in, whatever it is, 4 months. Versus some other areas like Sapperton seems to have had some really big sales. The west end of New West has had some big sales, but then we've seen some like slightly disappointing sales in other areas of the city too. So it seems like Port Moody overall has become one of the more desirable neighborhoods in Greater Vancouver, and it's pretty consistent across the board. Condos, townhouses, and houses versus New West and Burnaby are kind of all over the map, product dependent. Yeah. I guess Port Moody's limited by the number of properties it has. Yeah.
It is not a big community. And we're using Port Moody as the prime example because it's the most popular of the suburbs out that way. But really what's happening in Port Moody is trickling down in Poco, Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge, every community kind of along the mountains moving east of it. Fun fact, Denny, some of my stat research from this morning. Okay, here we go. So just looking at the latest stat package that came out from the Real Estate Board for March, which came out a few weeks ago, it said that March was the most active sales month on record for March. So it was 72% above the 10-year average, but it was also just the most active March recorded. I think January and February were above the 10-year average, but not the highest ever. And I think that was limited to a lack of listings. But now the listings are out. So I'm going to just say that I'm guessing that April is probably going to be the highest month recorded on record when we get that stat package come in next week from the board. But the highlights, last 6 months, I just looked at detached house price appreciation just to give you an idea. And a lot of this gain happened, I'd say 75% of this gain happened in the last 3 months, but I'm giving you a last 6 month stat. So Ladner up 9. These were the hot suburb markets. Ladner was up 19%. Maple Ridge up 20.3%. Pitt Meadows 19.1%. Poco 20.5%. And Port Moody was low on the list at 17.1%. And that's a 6 month gain for the benchmark price. Now those are very broad stats. Denny and I like to look at specific examples of specific age homes in apple to apple sort of neighborhoods, but I mean, we're talking about a 19-ish% lift in the last 6 months, and I would say 15% of that was in the last 3 months. And there's examples of more. There's examples of homes that have seen prices that, if the market went up another 20%, that would still be a good price. Some lucky sale prices do happen.
Totally.
Yeah. So, and then the other in terms of the sales volume, like, the hottest, like Delta, Whistler, Squamish, these areas were 195 to 180%, 88% above the number of sales that compared to this time last year. Now, this time last year, March last year was when COVID was announced, so it was a down month. But like, we're talking about not 100% more, like 195% more. So that just shows opposites of months when you have different things going on. Anyway, very high sales activity, highest March on record, probably going to be the highest April on record. And I wouldn't be surprised if May and June kind of hover those marks as well. So in terms of sales volume, we're in, what could be the hottest year in our market to date.
Ever, for sure.
Yeah.
Where do you feel like this new Port Moody comparison is going?
Yeah.
Is Port Moody just taking off and going to separate itself from other suburbs, or are the others going to start catching up?
I think we're limited. That's a good question, Denny. I think depends on the horizon, but like over, let's say, a 10-year window, I think the biggest limitation over like the next 5-10 years is just what people can afford.
Yeah.
And what my guess is going to happen is Port Moody is never going to get less desirable, but there might be more market fear at certain times over the next 10 years where the market prices backtrack a little. They're not making more houses. So due to the lack of the fixed supply, I think it will perform well. But what I feel will happen, like when we did the Burnaby New West comparison before, is Port Moody could get so expensive that it pulls the surrounding areas up with it. So that the gap between a Port Moody condo versus a New West condo, townhouses versus New West townhouse, house versus house, that gap can get large. But once it starts getting to a point where it's stretched out, where buyers start realizing the savings that they can have by just choosing the same option in a different neighborhood not too far away, that's where trends start shifting. So I guess my thought would be is what do we feel the long-term gap would be? Do we feel that the gap between Port Moody prices and New West today will remain 5-10 years from now? And I guess not that my opinion matters in this case, but my thought is yes. I do think so. And I have a number of different reasons for that, but I do feel that the gap that Port Moody versus New West has right now, I think that will remain for the time being. I think in order for that to change, I think we'd have to see a real surgence of local business and life and activity in the inner city suburbs, because right now, nature and water and mountains are winning out.
Can't argue there.
And then that, I think when we're talking about Port Moody, what we're really leaving out is the more affordable options that have similar characteristics. I mean, they don't have the beaches and lakes, but Poco may not, but Pitt Meadows and Maple Ridge. Like, Maple Ridge is a community that it probably does get a lot more talk than it used to, but it is stunning and beautiful out there. And in a world where you don't need to commute to downtown, there is so much land out there. It has, I'd say if we're talking about a 100-year horizon, I think Maple Ridge is going to be incredible 100 years out. It's just who knows how long, how it's going to go over the next 5, 10, 20. I think it's going to continue to grow and get better. But I would hope that it grows the right way with, nice density in downtown cores versus like a sprawling single family, city like Kelowna or something like that. It's like I'd love for it to have a good vibe, and it may not. It may miss that mark. But I think Maple Ridge is kind of maybe the future Port Moody that will be a little bit more reachable for the masses. Because Port Moody, I think off Ioko and more Belcarra, I think those neighborhoods will continue to separate themselves. They will continue to get more expensive as they're rare. But yeah, the areas like Glen Eyre College Park versus New West, I think those will probably, I used an example of a 1950s bungalow being about $100,000 apart. I think that would be about the same. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess, Denny, Port Moody will always be a little more expensive, but New West should have, I'd like to think the inner city suburbs will have a little bit of a comeback with products that are a little bit more depressed. Like, I'm using houses as an example, but 1-bedroom condos, 2-bedroom condos, townhouses, those are products that are, 1-bedroom condo for the first-time home buyer, townhouse for the family. Usually a lot of the buyers needing those really need that. They want to own a home. If they're a first-time buyer, they want a place for their family. Mm-hmm. And that's, we've had some examples in New West where those products haven't been doing as well, or arguably a 1-bedroom condo in New West and townhouses aren't necessarily at peak pricing. I think at 2017, 2018, we may have seen some higher price points than we're seeing today. Yeah. So yes, it's Port Moody's are clearly more desirable right now, but I think when you look at the prices, there's a good argument that New West is not getting the attention, and there are some better deals in New West that, from a rental perspective, from an investment perspective, might have a good return, or if not better return.
Mm-hmm. Do you think a city like New West that maybe doesn't have the outdoor amenities that a Port Moody, that a Pitt Meadows and Maple Ridge have, bounces back once this vaccine is out and life goes back to normal? Or do you think people's priorities have shifted in this last year?
I think a city like New West offers the most condo options for affordable price points for people that work in the city. Like, they just have more options available. Mm-hmm. So arguably it'd be a shame to compare it with Port Moody because it doesn't have as much supply. Mm-hmm. So would buyers choose New West over POCO? And I still think, in a lot of scenarios, yeah, I do. But it may not show its colors for a year or two. Yeah. I don't think it's going to show its colors this year. Yeah. I mean, maybe it does.
I don't think so. I think we're a ways off. I think it's like a year or two off. But I think it will have a bit of a bounce back. New West, for some reason, is slightly, I don't know if depressed is the right word, but like it's slightly down, and the activity level is not the same as other suburb markets. And I think it's because it doesn't have those outdoor amenities. And once people go back to work, which I think is going to happen eventually, I don't know if it's 3 months away or 3 years away, but I think New West bounces back, and I think we see a big surge in activity in this city.
New West had its moment like after Burnaby, mm-hmm. Arguably in the last market uptick in, say, 2017, 2018. Burnaby peaked 2016, New West trailed behind. We've seen these patterns before where, say, houses have their moments, then condos do. I mean, we're talking about New West versus Port Moody, but we're also talking about, like, houses in New West are far stronger than, say, condos in New West right now. Yeah. So, I think there's my crystal ball. I think houses in New West have more room to go, especially when you see the lucky sales, not lucky, but the new sales happening in, say, North Van and Port Moody. There's some pretty big gaps. We've just last week sold a place in Upper Delbrook that got a phenomenal price. And when I look at what that house would be worth, like what low twos gets you in North Van now versus New West, it's just night and day. Like, we're not talking about a big home for a low twos in North Van now. So I don't know where I'm going with that, but I feel like houses in New West have a little room to grow because other cities are so crazy, and the examples in New West aren't as crazy.
Exactly.
But I also feel that when we come out of this, when the madness of this housing market eases, which call it next year or the year after, then condos might have that slingshot effect and come back. Then it might be the condo moment to shine. So I wouldn't be surprised if, maybe this fall we see a little bit of negativity out there. So condos are selling for around the same prices as they are today. But I have a feeling like maybe this time next year, it will, feel more normal, social. Restaurants will be open. People will be dying for social behavior, and I think we forget fast, and the moment that we forget what the pandemic was like quickly, and if mortgage rates are low and there's a lot of first time buyers and condo homeowners, I mean that market could be very strong. Because, I think if you're buying next spring and you're looking at condo prices and you're like, when I'm buying in some markets, these people paid more 4 years ago than what I'm paying. And some, so there's, not in Port Moody, but in say Cole Harbour, maybe Yaletown, maybe New West, there's examples where you could next year conceivably shop for a condo at the same price as it was 4 years prior. Mm-hmm. That seems like a good deal to me.
I think so too.
Yeah. The point of this kind of episode is just to kind of acknowledge that certain parts of the city move differently than others, not just geographically, but product types. And right now, we're in a market that is catered towards more space, so houses and townhouses, and in cities that are more outdoor amenity oriented. And I could see another world right around the corner where it goes to smaller spaces, because like condos, and inner city markets. And I think we bring this up just because oftentimes I get a question from clients like, where do I invest? If I'm going to buy an investment property, where do I go? And what they're hoping for is for you to take the decision-making process off their mind and make it easy for them so they don't have to think about that. But the reality is I can't help but think, like, yes, when I look back at the last 10 years, okay, Port Moody's been the winner. But when you look ahead 10 years, Port Moody's been winning. Is it going to continue to win? And there's an argument for it, and there's an argument against it. So, basically the way that I answer that question is it's hard for me to say one area is going to outperform the other. I have my biases of where I like. And yes, a place in, say, Anmore, Belcarra, an acre in Anmore, they're not making more acres in the city that are this close with beautiful lakes close by and mountains. But that relies on people being able to afford to live there for that to go up in price. And I know for the longest time, I used to say, well, geez, East Van, if you want to buy anything, just buy an East Van house. Like East Van is bulletproof. East Van's always it's the hottest market in down markets. It's the hottest market in hot markets. But when you actually take a step back every once in a while and look at the stats, you start recognizing that, a lot of areas over a longer period of time kind of have a similar performance. And it's, maybe East Van outperforms more areas than not, but choosing today New West versus Port Moody, or New West versus Tawasin, or Port Moody versus Tawasin, or Port Moody versus Squamish, I would say I wouldn't be stuck on a mindset that one's going to outperform the other. I would look at the product, the property type, your lifestyle, and how you want to manage that property, and just assume that the return is going to be the same. Whether you're right or wrong, you're not going to find out for 5 years anyway. So might as well go into it buying, assuming that the return is going to be the same.
I like it.
Denny, any thoughts from your end on the condo? I think specifically condo world. Brentwood's got a lot of condos. Burnaby has 100 towers in planning over the next 20 years.
If I was to make a prediction for condos in the next 5 years, I think life's going to go back to normal, pretty normal, in the next 12 months or so. And I think a lot of people are going to start moving back towards Vancouver.
Do you feel that the market can eat the supply of these $900 to $1 million 2-bedroom condos that are going to be rampant in Burnaby everywhere?
Yes.
Yeah.
The reason, I think Canada is going to see some more hefty inflation rates than we've seen in the last few decades in the next 5 years to 10 years. And I think people are going to start moving back to the city as they're going back to work. It seems like, just in talking to like business owners and people that work downtown and the lawyers and the accountants, they get more out of being at the office, it seems like. And a lot of companies are already starting to have employees and partners and like go back to work a few days a week or even full time. And I see like people just being sick of the commutes. People that have moved out to Langley and Maple Ridge for more space, for a house, for whatever it may be. I think a lot of them are going to come back.
Yeah. Well, not to go too off topic, but Burnaby has a lot of expensive new towers coming down. Mm-hmm. And they might be the one exception where it may take extra time. But there was a moment where that Brentwood condo market, despite how much construction it has going on, was insanely hot. Like Concord Brentwood was getting 1,300 to 1,400 a foot, and they're on the high end of their price points. Now they're not. But maybe that if those prices remain for the next 2-3 years, maybe 3 years from now, that starts feeling like a deal again. But right now, at this moment in time, if I had, say, $900,000 to put in an investment rental, or $800,000 to put in a rental, I would probably be looking at the resale market, and I would probably, again, could be wrong, but I'd probably place my bet on Vancouver proper, and that maybe Yaletown or anywhere close to downtown that's favorable. Just because I think there's that's an area that has been a little bit depressed, and that's an area that I think will rebound the hardest when we all forget what this was like, and we want to live in the scene again.
I agree. I texted you a few weeks ago saying Olympic Village, 1 in Den, $800,000, $825,000. I think that's a pretty good deal right now. It rents for $2,800 a month roughly. So most of your expenses are covered. You might be out of pocket $200 a month. But I think that has a very realistic potential to be $1 million in 2 years from now.
And the rents should increase over time as well.
Agree.
Yeah. And I truly believe if we start getting the wealth from other parts of the world that start saying, hey, let's relocate to BC after this pandemic.
Where in BC they're going to go?
A lot of it's going to go to Vancouver.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, Dan, I think this was a good episode. Hopefully some people found some value in our suburb analysis. Thanks for listening.